talking about work, and I know this is a topic that is in many young people as well as older people. And so the question we have here is, why is it that people naturally associate their worth with their work? And what triggers our desire to find worth or purpose in our workplace? So I guess it has something to do with our self-value. We talked a little bit about that in the relationship as well. So yeah, if you can render us some thoughts around this.
Well, I think it's natural to put value and worth into what we spend much of our lives doing. Many of us spend time and energy getting training and getting prepared for careers. We spend 8, 9, 10, sometimes a lot more hours doing that work. So it makes sense we're going to want to find value and meaning in what we do. It also sets up a socioeconomical strata too, though, because our culture values some jobs more than others based on all the factors. It's always interesting to me that in other cultures, the jobs that would get the highest level of socioeconomic status are not that same strata in a different culture. So it depends on the context. But that's also how we end up rating ourselves too. Where am I in on those levels? And we can use that to move up. But it's all natural to do that. I think the problem comes in when it becomes too much of a part of our identity and where we identify who we are as a person based on what we do for a living or for a career. I know when I get together with men, the second or third question is going to be, what do you do? And I know I do it. And that's one way we connect with each other. Oh, you do this, I do this. And so it's a natural way to identify who we are. But at the end of the day, I should not be identified by what I do, but by who I am. Because at the end of the day, we are human beings, not human doers. So I think it becomes a problem when there's too much of who we are gets wrapped up in what we do for a living and the product and success of it. So if we look just at whether I'm successful at business or in my career, what does it mean if I'm not successful? Do I lose my identity? Am I less worth and value as a person if I don't have a profitable career or a high status career? Am I any less of a person, less valued by people, by God? I say absolutely not. And so I think it can become a major issue for some people.
Both you had mentioned like out of balance or being too much.
Right.
Where now it's affecting your identity, your self-true worth. How do you know when it's too much? What would be?
Burnout, right?
Well, burnout's a huge part of it. And burnout can sneak up on you.
Yeah.
And when I say burnout, I mean some of the symptoms of being overworked to the point where you're no longer finding satisfaction in your work. There's a depression many times that comes in. And because our bodies are built by God to have these mechanisms that will shut us down when we overload, I think of it like a circuit board of circuit breakers. And you can get to the place where all the circuit breakers start clicking off because you've overloaded the system. And I've seen that happen, had a couple close calls myself because I wasn't aware of just how far down that road I'd gone. You kind of smell the crispiness, but you think, I can just motor through this, I can just do this. And you do it despite the clear signs that you need to slow down, you need to take a break, you need to rethink this, you need to stop saying yes and start saying no. So that's a very real danger. And since our bodies are the last frontier, it's the last thing that we have, they will shut us down. I've seen it happen where someone gets so burnt out, so far gone, they just stop functioning, period. And then it takes a while to get back. They have to rebalance their life and restart again.
So before the physical symptoms show up, would you say emotional or the mental signs will show up prior to that? And there's a clear sign of maybe a red light that you want to pause or reassess?
That hopelessness, that depression, that stressed out, that anxiety. It's interesting to me because it's really hard to parse mind, body, and soul. I mean, we're so interrelated that our thoughts affect our neurochemistry, which affects our body. Our thoughts can trigger our sympathetic nervous system to send adrenaline coursing through our body, or cortisol raises, and that can take an hour and a half to calm down. So it's typically an hour and a half is how long it takes for that to calm down. And so we're living these, okay, I'm trying not to get too far down the health kick, but it leads to inflammation in your body. Stress is just really hard for your emotions and your body, and and your soul. We're just so interconnected.
Just to follow up on the physical, because that's very real. Now, we may call it anxiety, but many times it's an adrenaline rush, it's a cortisol thing, and we are not designed to always be in a high vigilant place, the fight or flight. We're not designed to do that. We're designed to do it and to get away from the bear that's going to get us or get off the railroad tracks, and then we're supposed to calm down. But what I see is that when you're focused on work, especially high pressure work, high stress work, when that goes on, it depletes the body, and the cortisol starts to deplete. You have enough adrenalines, the adrenaline glands will stop working, and then you have a medical issue.
Adrenal fatigue.
Adrenal fatigue, and that's real.
But I think before you get to that, you do feel hopeless, you feel depressed because nothing's changing, and you feel like work is running your life, you're not running work, if that makes sense. Work is in the driver's seat. And I think that's when you have to take some ownership and make some decisions, but it's hard.
Yeah, tail's
It's
wagging
hard.
the dog. The other place we see it often is in marriages and relationships. When one party, and it doesn't always have to be the male, sometimes it's the woman who's working all these crazy hours, and the relationship starts to deteriorate. And then that creates marital issues, relationship issues. And then that level of irritability comes in, and I've talked to women who said, well, if he doesn't care enough about me to stay home and say no to the overtime at work, then I don't really care about him anymore. I don't have those feelings for him because the relationship isn't getting nurtured. It's not being grown. And she realizes he cares more about work than he cares about me. And that's when they end up in our office, hopefully.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, how it affects our relationships, and then this kind of segues into the next question was, it's not just that it's like assessing our own value, but also how we also interject that to value others by their occupation or their work. So the question was how this affects creating and building meaningful, trusting relationship with community and others. And how does that socioeconomic factors and what positions you hold or your financial status may affect how you decide to get into relationships as well as engage in relationships as well as to develop in that. How is that healthy, or, how would you advise young people to maneuver through this kind of challenges or thoughts?
I like the word challenges. Like, don't stay in your comfort zone. Get out of your comfort zone. I think when we befriend people of different socioeconomic status, ethnicity, faiths, we really enrich our lives, and hopefully we enrich theirs. So honestly, I think it's just sort of this choice you make to intentionally and deliberately reach out to others. It may be hard to find where to do that. You could maybe look at a civic group, volunteering.
That's great.
Yeah, I think civic groups that do service projects are a great way to just meet a lot of different people you wouldn't have any real reason to run into. And then you learn to connect with them over the desire to help somebody. Like going to a widow's house and fixing it up. I mean, that's not only needed, but it's also connects you to the people you're working alongside. And you can make friends for life by even being on one of those projects. Habitat for Humanity is another great. There's just a lot of opportunities to serve and get past ourselves and out to see people we wouldn't normally have a reason to run into.
Yeah.
So this other question we got, it was, in a work setting, how do I best frame my response to people who want something from me that I cannot or am unwilling to give them so that we can leave on the best terms possible? So I think this says something in the lines of saying no, or being able to be different, or also protecting your own parameters, but not feeling like you're ending or you're rejecting a relationship or in any way making the other feel like that you're not there or present to give. I think this may be a frame of questions where they are in a work setting, but where they have to say no, whether it be a boss requesting you to do things, or it could be your coworkers.
Yeah, I think one thing I say about that is we all have to get to the place where we're willing to accept that not everybody's going to accept our no, and that there are going to be, in fact, some consequences, because some people want us to do things that are good for them but not good for me. And we've got to be willing to tolerate being able to say no and deal with whatever comes from that. I think that requires a strong sense of self and to have clear priorities, especially if the no is overtime and your significant other is saying, hey, we had a dinner date tonight, you got a decision to make. And it sometimes means no. So I think we have to practice our no in smaller ways, so when it comes time to say no to some big thing, or I know I don't want to do that project, or no, I don't want to travel out of town, that we're able to do that and find out we can pull that off. So I think if we're afraid to say no, we're going to end up doing things we don't want to do. We say yes when we mean no, and then we lose self-esteem because we know we meant to say no and couldn't make ourselves say no.
Right.
And then we get stuck doing something we're going to resent.
I think in the actual delivery of it, make sure you're respectful. I think grow in personal authority, and that personal authority gives you the authority to say no, slow, later, not this time, but next time. People who have good personal authority are good with eye contact. And when you're making eye contact, people know you mean what you're saying, you know, mean what you say what you mean and mean what you say. So I don't know if that helps. It's just practice again. Just try.
I think when we're willing to say no, that will be respected. It may not be liked.
Right.
But they will find out, I'm not going to do everything they tell me to do because they need it. That I'm going to set those limits that are best for me, and they're going to have to respect those because they'll do that every time. After a while, they stop asking you because they know that you're going to say no if you want to say no.
Set the precedent.
Yet some people are, especially young adults, they are fearful that if they keep saying no,
Right.
that they may disappoint a relationship or they may fall out of relationship. Is there a healthier way, like you said, in the delivery or even?
Well, I know you can certainly be respectful and be warm and give context. Like you might say, I would love to if I had the time, but I can't do this thing for you now. I could do it Friday or whatever the thing is. You can soften delivery, but a deeper layer is, can you tolerate disappointing someone? Can you tolerate discomfort? Can you tolerate your own humanity? Like you're one person. Can you be okay with that? And I think that's part of what you're working through when you're working through disappointing, you know, the coworker who wants to go home and have fun but can't unless you do their work for them or something like that. You know, tolerate they're not happy with me now. And that's okay.
I also think it reveals the nature of the relationship you have with someone when you say no and they can't deal with your no and they fall out of relationship. I would question what kind of relationship you had with them if they can't hear and accept your no.
Right. I call that the law of exposure. It exposes what the relationship was in the first place. So.
Right. I mean, especially because the other point that was made was to stay connected and communicate with our loved ones who are very close to us, while knowing when to disengage and creating space for yourself. Again, it kind of goes into, it could be family members or your very close ones, and so it becomes even more challenging and difficult.
It is. And again, you have to tolerate, you have to be respectful, and you have to tolerate a little bit of that tension. I do think when we practice these things, it get a little easier, but if your limit, your no, is met with a lot of resistance consistently, it might be exposing the fact that there's some entrenched behavior you can't change, and you have to learn to be okay with that and make a decision about what you're going to do. You know, am I going to cave or am I going to let them be disappointed or mad at me and just tolerate that. I keep coming back to that, I feel like.
Well, I think the idea of practicing saying no in small ways is really important, because what I often see is people don't say no when they want to say no, and then eventually they go, no!
Right, right.
And that's a good way to mess up relationships. So if you consistently say no to the smaller things and be congruent and be consistent, then it's a little easier to say the big no and mean it without losing your mind on somebody.
Right. I have a little note about taking turns. I mean, if it's an ongoing relationship like husband and wife, I get to say no this time, you can say no next time.
Oh, wow. Is that what you guys practice?
Sometimes. No, it's my turn to say no.
Really? Oh,
I'm going to give you a coupon book for saying no.
I think that's a smart way.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody gets a little coupon book to pass around and use your coupon today.
Yeah.
So that's great. Yeah, practical example of how to deal with that. So, no, that's great.
And respect.
Yeah. Thank you.